The great meeting hall on Viridian Prime had never seen so many desperate faces. Representatives from 1,000 different worlds sat in their floating chairs, one carrying the weight of their dying civilizations. The air was thick with fear and the smell of defeat. Ambassador Jiho of the Altarian Federation walked slowly to the center platform. His blue skin had turned pale, and his usually steady hands shook as he activated the holographic display. The images that appeared made everyone in the hall gasp with horror. 17 star systems had vanished in just 30 days. Not destroyed or conquered, but completely eaten away until nothing remained but empty space. The Devourers had come again. This time they would not stop until every world was gone. Jiho's voice cracked as he spoke to the silent crowd. Friends, we are here today because our greatest fears have come true. The ancient enemy has returned. They are stronger than ever before. The hologram showed the last moments of the Kelton system. The Devourers appeared as a massive dark cloud that stretched across space, moving like a hungry beast toward the helpless planets. When they touched the first world, it simply disappeared, gone in seconds, as if it had never existed at all. Counselor Minho, from the crystalline worlds, stood up next. His crystal body was dim, lacking its usual bright glow. He had been studying the attack patterns for weeks, trying to find some weakness or hope. What he found instead was mathematical certainty of extinction. I have run the numbers 1,000 times, Minho said, his voice echoing strangely in the silent hall. At their current speed, the Devourers will consume our entire galaxy in less than 2 standard years. Every planet, every moon, every space station, everything. A wave of despair rolled through the audience. Some representatives began to weep. Others sat frozen in shock. The Zephyrian delegate stood up and walked out without saying a word. 3 more followed him. They had heard enough. The truth was simple and terrible. Every weapon they had tried against the Devourers had failed. Energy beams were absorbed and made the creatures stronger. Nuclear bombs disappeared into their dark mass without leaving a trace. Even their most advanced battleships were swallowed whole. Adding their technology and knowledge to the enemy's growing power, General Sola from the War Council stepped forward. Her scarred face showed the strain of leading to many losing battles. We have sent 12 separate fleets against them, 100,000 of our best warriors, the finest ships we ever built. None returned. The Devourers learned from each attack and became harder to fight. The room fell into deeper silence. Everyone knew what General Sola meant. Not only were they losing the war, but they were making the enemy stronger with every failed attempt to stop them. It was like feeding a fire while trying to put it out. Young Counselor Hannah from the Trade Federation raised her hand to speak. Her voice was small, but clear in the massive hall. Perhaps we should evacuate to the Outer Rim galaxies. We could take our people and run while there is still time. Before anyone could answer, the ancient voice of Counselor Nari filled the room. The old woman from the Wisdom Keepers had been silent for hours, her wrinkled face lost in deep thought. Now she stood slowly, leaning heavily on her walking staff. Child, Nari said to Hannah, there is nowhere to run. The Devourers have consumed galaxies before. They will follow us to the edge of the universe if they must. Running only delays the inevitable. The weight of those words settled on everyone like a heavy blanket. If the Wisdom Keepers, who had lived for thousands of years and seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, believed there was no escape, then perhaps there truly was none. But Nari was not finished speaking. She moved slowly to the center of the platform, her ancient eyes scanning the crowd. When she spoke again, her voice carried a strange mixture of fear and hope. However, she said, there may be one possibility. Something so dangerous that it was hidden away and forbidden to speak of. Something that even the gods themselves fear. The hall erupted in confused whispers. Gods fearing something? It seemed impossible. The cosmic entities that watched over the galaxy were older and more powerful than anyone could imagine. What could possibly frighten beings like that? Nari raised her hand for silence. Long ago, before most of your species had learned to walk upright, the Divine Council discovered a race that troubled them greatly. These beings were young and weak, barely past the Stone Age. They had no great technology or powerful weapons, but they possessed something that made even cosmic gods nervous. She paused and looked around the room, making sure she had everyone's attention. They never gave up. No matter how badly they were beaten or how impossible the situation became, they would find a way to keep fighting. They adapted to anything. They learned from every defeat. They turned their greatest weaknesses into their most powerful weapons. Ambassador Jiho leaned forward in his chair. What happened to this race? Where are they now? Nari's old face showed a mixture of fear and wonder. They were quarantined, hidden away in a forgotten corner of the galaxy where no one would ever find them. The gods were so frightened of what they might become that they erased almost all records of their existence. But you know where they are? Said General Sola. It was not a question. Yes, Nari whispered. They live on the third planet of a yellow star system. They call themselves humans. And according to our oldest and most secret archives, they are the only species in the known universe that the Devourers have never countered. The hall exploded in arguments and debates. Some called Nari crazy for suggesting they contact a quarantined species. Others demanded to know why the gods would hide potential allies. A few representatives started calculating how long it would take to reach this mysterious human homeworld. Through all the noise and confusion, Ambassador Jiho stared at the star charts displayed above them. Somewhere out there, on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable sun, lived a species that might hold the key to salvation. Or they might be the final nail in the galaxy's coffin. But as the Devourers drew closer to their core worlds, consuming everything in their path, desperate times called for desperate measures. The question was not whether contacting the humans was dangerous. The question was whether they had any choice left at all. The meeting continued long into the night. But the decision had already been made. When faced with certain extinction, even the most remote chance of survival was worth taking. Soon, ships would be heading toward Earth, carrying with them the hopes and fears of 1 trillion souls. The humans had no idea what was coming for them. They had no way of knowing that their peaceful little world was about to become the center of a cosmic war. But perhaps, if the old stories were true, that would not matter. Perhaps being unprepared was exactly what made them dangerous. As the representatives filed out of the hall, each returning to their doomed worlds to prepare for the impossible mission ahead, one thought echoed through all their minds. The end was certain. But maybe, just maybe, they had found the one species in the universe too stubborn to accept it. Captain Heian gripped the control panel of his ship as it dropped out of hyperspace near Earth's moon. The blue and green world spinning below looked so peaceful and innocent. He could hardly believe that this small planet might hold the key to saving the entire galaxy. His science officer, Yanji, looked up from her scanning equipment with wide eyes. Captain, the energy readings from this planet are incredible. These humans are not just using their resources. They are pushing every single limit they can find. Hyun nodded grimly. Breaking the galactic accords by making unauthorized contact with a quarantined species was the least of his crimes today. If the Galactic Council found out what he was doing, they would lock him away forever. But if he did nothing, there would be no galaxy left to punish him, the reconnaissance vessel. Starweaver moved silently through Earth's upper atmosphere. Hyun had studied the human communication networks for days, trying to find the right person to contact first. He needed someone smart enough to understand the situation quickly, but not so important that their disappearance would cause panic. He found his target in Dr. Dabin Kim, a theoretical physicist working alone in a research laboratory late at night. Hyun activated the transport beam and materialized directly in front of the surprised. Dr. Kim was a small man with tired eyes and messy hair. When a 7-foot-tall alien suddenly appeared in his lab, his first reaction was not to scream or run away. Instead, he pushed his glasses up his nose and said, "Fascinating. How did you manage to transport matter through solid walls without disrupting molecular bonds?" Hyun stared at the human in surprise. In all his years of first contact missions, no species had ever responded to his arrival by asking technical questions. Most either worshipped him as a god or tried to attack him with primitive weapons. But this human was already walking around him, studying his equipment with intense curiosity. "You are not afraid?" Hyun asked carefully. Dr. Kim looked at him with genuine confusion. "Why would I be afraid? You obviously have technology far beyond ours. If you wanted to hurt me, I would already be dead. Since you chose to appear in my lab instead of in public, you probably want to talk privately. So let us talk." Within the first hour, Dr. Kim had not only accepted the existence of alien life, but had started sketching improvements to Hyen's transport system. His suggestions were so creative that even Yoonji, who had been working with galactic technology for decades, was taking notes. But it was when Han explained the situation with the Devourers that Dr. Kim truly shocked him. The human listened carefully to the description of unstoppable cosmic entities consuming entire star systems. He asked detailed questions about their attack patterns, energy signatures, and behavioral characteristics. Then he sat quietly for several minutes, thinking. Finally, Dr. Kim looked up and said, "You have been approaching this problem incorrectly. You are trying to fight them with brute force, but they absorb all energy and matter. Instead, you need to attack their fundamental nature." "What do you mean?" Hyun asked. "These Devourers sound like they operate on predictable consumption patterns. They are like a virus or a computer program running the same code over and over. If you can introduce something unexpected into their system, something that contradicts their basic programming, you might be able to disrupt them." Hyun felt a chill run down his spine. In 10 minutes. This primitive human had suggested a strategy that the galaxy's greatest military minds had never considered. Perhaps the old stories about humans were true. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. More humans were contacted, each one chosen carefully for their expertise and discretion. Military leaders like General Soman Park analyzed the tactical data with a ruthlessness that made Hyen uncomfortable. She spoke of sacrifice and acceptable losses with the calm certainty of someone who had seen real war. Dr. Yuna Choi, a biologist, became fascinated with the idea that the Devourers might have some kind of collective consciousness. She theorized that if they shared thoughts and knowledge, they might also share weaknesses and vulnerabilities. But it was the reaction of ordinary humans that truly amazed the galactic observers. When news of the cosmic threat was carefully leaked to select government officials, humanity did not panic. Instead, they immediately began mobilizing resources and volunteers. Engineer Sunho Lee gathered a team of the world's best builders and designers. Within days, they were working around the clock to understand and improve upon galactic technology. They approached every problem with an attitude that Hyun had never seen before. Where galactic engineers would say something was impossible, humans would ask why and then find a way to make it work anyway. The most disturbing example came when Commander Gina of Earth's Space Force heard the full briefing about the Devourers. After learning that entire fleets of alien warships had been consumed without leaving a trace, her response was immediate and shocking. "We need volunteers for suicide missions," she said calmly. "If conventional attacks only make them stronger, we need people willing to get inside them and attack from within." Within hours, thousands of humans had volunteered. Not soldiers looking for glory or criminals hoping to avoid punishment, but ordinary people willing to die to save species they had never heard of. Teachers, doctors, farmers, and students all stepped forward to offer their lives for strangers. Hyun reported back to the Galactic Council with growing amazement and fear. "These humans are unlike any species we have ever encountered. They do not just adapt to challenges. They seem to enjoy them. The more impossible a problem appears, the more excited they become about solving it." Counselor Minho's crystal body pulsed with nervous energy. "Are you saying they might actually be able to help us?" "I am saying they have already started helping us," Hyun replied. "They have proposed 17 different strategies for fighting the Devourers. Most of them involve tactics that have never been tried before because they are too dangerous or too crazy for any rational species to attempt." General Sola leaned forward in her chair. "And you believe these tactics might work?" Hyun was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I believe these humans might be exactly what Counselor Nari said they were. a species too stubborn to accept defeat and too creative to be stopped by impossibility. As he spoke, reports were coming in from human research centers around Earth. Teams of scientists and engineers were working together in ways that violated every known principle of interspecies cooperation. They shared information freely, built upon each other's ideas, without concern for credit or recognition, and pushed themselves to exhaustion in pursuit of solutions. Most shocking of all, they were making progress. Human modifications to galactic weapon systems showed promise. Human psychological warfare techniques were being adapted for use against collective consciousness entities. Human volunteers were undergoing genetic modifications to make them more suitable for infiltrating the Devourers. From within, the galaxy had called upon humanity, expecting to find primitive allies who might buy them a little more time before the inevitable end. Instead, they had found a species that refused to believe the end was inevitable at all. As Earth's governments began the massive undertaking of preparing their world for galactic war, one thing became clear to all the alien observers. Humanity was not going to be a desperate last hope. They were going to be something far more dangerous. They were going to be the variable that changed everything. The joint military station on Kepler Station had never seen anything like the chaos that followed humanity's arrival. Fleet Commander Tyke of the Void Runners watched in amazement as human engineers swarmed over his proudest warships like busy insects, tearing apart systems that had worked perfectly for centuries. Dr. Sun-Ho Lee stood in the middle of the engineering bay, his hands covered in grease and his eyes bright with excitement. Around him, alien and human technicians worked together on modifications that made veteran spaceship designers question everything they thought they knew about warfare. Commander Tyke, Dr. Lee called out cheerfully. "We need to remove all your main weapon systems." Tyke's eyes bulged with shock. "Remove our weapons? How are we supposed to fight the Devourers without weapons?" "We are not removing them," Dr. Lee explained patiently. "We are relocating them. Your ships are built like fortresses designed to survive frontal attacks. But the Devourers do not attack. They simply consume. We need to make your ships think like predators instead of prey." Within days, the human modifications began to take shape. Where galactic warships had massive forward-mounted cannons, humans installed smaller weapons that could fire in all directions. Where aliens built thick armor plating, humans added layers of reactive materials that could be jettisoned instantly to confuse enemy targeting systems. But the real changes went far deeper than technology. Commander Gina Yu of the human military contingent gathered the alien officers for a briefing that would change everything they thought they knew about warfare. "Your military doctrine is based on one fundamental assumption," she told the assembled crowd. "That victory goes to whoever has the most powerful weapons and the strongest defenses. This assumption is wrong when fighting the Devourers." General Sola shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "What do you suggest instead?" "Asymmetric warfare," Commander Yu replied. "We cannot match their power, so we will not try. Instead, we will exploit their predictable behavior patterns. We will make them waste energy. We will confuse their targeting systems. We will turn their greatest strengths into weaknesses." The alien officers looked at each other with confusion and concern. This went against thousands of years of proven military strategy. But they had seen their proven strategies fail completely against the Devers. Dr. Gina Shin, a human specialist in alien psychology, stepped forward to explain the most controversial part of their plan. "We have studied every recorded encounter with the Devourers. They learn and adapt by consuming technology and knowledge. But we believe they can also be fed false information." "What kind of false information?" asked Counselor Minho. "Cognitive traps," Dr. Shin replied. "Ideas that seem logical on the surface but contain hidden contradictions. When an intelligence tries to fully understand these concepts, it gets caught in endless processing loops." She activated a holographic. "These are what we call cognitive viruses. They attack the enemy's ability to think clearly rather than their physical form." The concept was so alien to galactic military thinking that several officers walked out of the briefing. The idea of weaponizing thoughts and ideas seemed impossible and dangerous. But Dr. Kiwan Nam, human neuroscientist, had an even more radical proposal. We want to modify human volunteers using galactic biotechnology. Not to make them stronger or faster, but to enhance their creativity and pattern recognition abilities. Why would you want to do that? Asked Fleet Commander Tyke. Because our greatest weapon is not our technology or our physical abilities, Dr. Nam explained. It is our capacity to see solutions where others see only problems. We want to amplify that capacity. The first volunteer for the enhancement process was Dr. Dabin Kim himself. The procedure took place in the medical bay with both human and alien doctors monitoring every step. Instead of adding muscle mass or improving reflexes, the biotechnology enhanced the neural pathways responsible for creative thinking and problem solving. When Dr. Kim woke up from the procedure, the change was immediately obvious. His eyes moved constantly, analyzing everything around him and finding connections that others missed. Within hours, he had proposed 12 new modifications to the fleet's weapon systems and identified 3 previously unknown weaknesses in devourer attack patterns. But the enhanced humans also showed disturbing side effects. They became obsessed with solving problems, often working for days without sleep or food. They spoke in rapid bursts of ideas that were difficult for others to follow. Most concerning of all, they began to see the entire war as one giant puzzle to be solved, rather than a life or death struggle. Commander, you've had to establish strict protocols for managing the enhanced humans. They are brilliant, she reported to the Joint Command. But they have lost some of their emotional connection to the consequences of failure. We need to keep them focused on the human cost of losing this war, as the first joint human galactic fleet prepared for deployment.
Ow.
The changes were obvious to everyone. The ships moved differently, with quick darting motions, instead of the stately progress of traditional galactic vessels. The crews worked with an energy and enthusiasm that made older alien officers nervous. Most importantly, the humans had introduced something that had been missing from galactic warfare for centuries: unpredictability. Every ship carried different modifications. Every crew had developed their own tactics. Even the human commanders did not know exactly what each vessel would do in combat. This is madness, General Sola muttered as she watched human pilots practicing maneuvers that violated every safety regulation in the galactic military. Handbook, yes, agreed Commander Yu with a dangerous smile. But it is exactly the kind of madness that the Devourers have never encountered before. The enhanced human Dr. Kim overheard their conversation and looked up from his tactical calculations. The Devourers operate on the assumption that all intelligent life follows logical patterns. They have consumed thousands of species, and every one of them has behaved predictably. We are about to introduce chaos into their perfectly ordered system. As the fleet prepared to depart for the first real test of human tactics, one thing was clear to everyone involved. They were no longer following any known rules of warfare. They were making up new rules as they went along, guided only by human instincts and enhanced creativity. The galaxy had called upon humanity for help. Now they were about to discover whether human help was salvation or just a more interesting form of destruction. The Nexus system hung in space like a jewel waiting to be stolen, rich with rare minerals and positioned at the crossroads of 3 major hyperspace routes. It was the perfect bait for the Devourers. Admiral Kang of the Joint Human Galactic Fleet watched his sensor displays as the cosmic entities approached exactly as the human strategists had. Predicted GAT Captain Boyon stood on the bridge of his modified vessel, indomitable, watching the impossible sight that filled the view screen. The Devourers stretched across several light hours of space, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to swallow the light from nearby stars. Every ship in the fleet could feel their presence, like a cold weight pressing against their minds. All ships report ready, announced communications. Officer Rena from her station. The cognitive virus transmitters are online. Holographic projection systems are at full power. Boarding teams are standing by. Admiral Kang had fought in dozens of battles during his long career. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Every instinct told him to order the fleet to retreat. The enemy was larger than anything they had ever faced. Their own weapons had proven useless against similar foes in the past. By all logical measures, they were about to commit suicide, but the humans had taught the galaxy something new. Logic was not the only tool available to thinking beings. Sometimes the most illogical action was the only one that made sense. Begin transmission of cognitive viruses. Admiral Kang ordered. Dr. Gina Shin activated her specially designed broadcast system from the research vessel Paradox. The signals that poured out toward the Devourers looked like ordinary communication attempts to any normal observer. But hidden within the data streams were Dr. Shin's carefully crafted mental traps. The first virus was a mathematical proof that 1 + 1 could equal both 2 and 3, depending on the observer's frame of reference. The second was a logical argument that something could be completely true and completely false at the same time. The third was a philosophical question about whether perfect knowledge was possible for any intelligence that existed within the system it was trying to understand. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Parts of the Devourer swarm began moving erratically, their perfect coordination disrupted by ideas that their collective consciousness could not fully process. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Devourers showed signs of confusion and internal conflict. Phase 2. Commander Gina Yu announced from the command ship, "Activate holographic deception." The space around the Nexus system suddenly filled with impossible sights. Duplicate planets appeared next to real ones. Entire star systems materialized out of nothing, complete with energy signatures identical to genuine celestial bodies. The Devourers found themselves surrounded by twice as many targets as had existed moments before. The cosmic entities, driven by their consumption instincts, began trying to devour the false systems. They wasted enormous amounts of energy, attempting to consume illusions, growing visibly smaller as they expended power on targets that did not exist. But humanity was not finished. The most dangerous part of their plan was about to begin. Lieutenant Jisoo Park led the first boarding party of volunteers who had undergone the most extreme modifications. Their bodies had been altered to survive brief exposure to the Devourer's energy matrix. Their minds had been enhanced to resist the psychological effects of being consumed. Most importantly, they carried biotechnological viruses designed to spread through the entity's collective consciousness. Remember? Lieutenant Park told her team as they prepared to launch their small craft directly into the Devourer mass. "We are not trying to survive this mission. We are trying to deliver our payload and cause maximum disruption before they absorb us." Captain Bojan watched in horror and admiration as the tiny human craft flew straight towards certain death. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was madness. No thinking being should willingly allow themselves to be consumed by the enemy. But the enhanced humans saw it differently. They had calculated that being consumed was not defeat if they could corrupt the enemy from within. They were turning their own destruction into a weapon. The first boarding craft disappeared into the dark mass of the nearest Devourer. Then the second. Then the third. For long minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The cosmic entities continued their chaotic attempt to consume the holographic illusions. Then, screaming began. It was not a sound that could be heard with normal ears. It was a psychic wail that resonated through the quantum foam of space itself. The Devourers were experiencing something they had never felt before in their eons of existence. Pain and confusion from within their own consciousness. The biotechnological viruses carried by the human boarding parties were spreading through the entity's shared mind like a plague of doubt and self-contradiction. Questions without answers multiplied endlessly through their collective thoughts. Logical paradoxes created feedback loops that consumed processing power without producing results. All ships, prepare for Phase 3, Admiral Kang ordered, his voice tight with controlled excitement. The enemy is disoriented. Begin conventional attack with modified weapons. The Joint Fleet opened fire with weapons that had been redesigned according to human specifications. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers directly, they targeted the connections between different parts of their collective consciousness. Energy beams designed to disrupt communication rather than cause physical damage struck the writhing mass of dark energy. The result, exceeded even the most optimistic human predictions. Cut off from parts of their collective mind and struggling with internal contradictions, the Devourers began to break apart into smaller fragments. Each fragment tried to reconnect with the others, but the cognitive viruses made coordination impossible. Dr. Dabin Kim, monitoring the battle from his enhanced perspective, suddenly shouted a warning. They are adapting faster than we expected. The viruses are being neutralized. We need to implement Contingency Plan Omega immediately. Contingency Plan Omega was the most desperate and dangerous strategy the humans had developed. It required the entire fleet to act as bait while broadcasting their own thoughts and memories directly into the Devourer consciousness. All ships will share their cultural databases with the enemy, Admiral Kong announced. Every story, every song, every memory of home and family. We will flood their minds with experiences they cannot process or understand. It was a strategy that only humans could have conceived. Instead of hiding their thoughts from a telepathic enemy, they would overwhelm it with the full complexity of organic life and emotion. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Devourers, masters of consuming matter and energy, found themselves drowning in experiences they could not digest. Love, hope, fear, joy, loss, and dreams poured into their collective consciousness faster than they could analyze or understand. 4. The first time in their existence, the cosmic entities experienced something that made them hesitate. They felt the weight of individual lives, the pain of personal loss, the irrational hope that drives organic beings to fight impossible battles. And slowly, incredibly, the Devourers began to retreat. It was not a strategic withdrawal or a temporary setback. It was genuine fear of something they could not consume or understand. They fled from the Nexus system like animals running from a fire, leaving behind the first battlefield they had ever abandoned. As the dark mass disappeared into hyperspace, the Joint Fleet found itself alone among the stars, victorious, but hardly believing what they had accomplished. "Status report," Admiral Kang called out, his voice shaking with exhaustion and amazement. "Enemy forces have withdrawn," Captain Bojan reported. "No pursuit detected. All remaining ships are reporting minimal damage, but the real victory is not measured in ships saved or territory defended." For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers had been forced to retreat not by superior firepower, but by something they could not process or consume. Humanity had taught the galaxy that even the most hopeless battle could be won if you were willing to fight it in a completely new way. In dimensions beyond normal space and time, beings older than galaxies watched the events in the Nexus system with growing alarm. The Architect, a cosmic entity made of pure thought and mathematics, communicated its distress to its fellow gods through waves of quantum probability. The Devourers had not just been defeated, they had been changed. For the first time in their eons of existence, the cosmic entities had experienced concepts they could not consume or control. Worse yet, they were beginning to question their own nature and purpose. The Weaver, whose consciousness spanned multiple dimensions and could see the threads that connected all things, reported something that made the other gods tremble with fear. The human influence is spreading beyond the battlefield. Species that have accepted their limitations for millions of years are beginning to ask dangerous questions. From its position outside normal reality, the Eternal Observer had watched countless civilizations rise and fall. It had seen species reach the peak of their development and then settle into comfortable decline. The cosmic order had been maintained through careful balance between growth and limitation, but humanity was destroying that balance. On worlds throughout the galaxy, alien scientists were studying the human tactics used against the Devourers. They were not just copying the technology or strategies, they were learning to think like humans, to question assumptions that had been accepted without examination for centuries. The crystalline worlds had begun experimenting with chaos mathematics after studying Dr. Dabin Kim's enhanced thought patterns. The Void Runners were restructuring their entire military doctrine based on human concepts of asymmetric warfare. Most disturbing of all, young members of various species were volunteering for consciousness enhancement procedures that would make them think more like humans, the divine collective. As the cosmic entities called their informal alliance faced a crisis they had never encountered in their billions of years of existence, how do you contain a species that refuses to be contained? How do you limit beings who turn every limitation into an opportunity for growth? The shepherd, responsible for guiding the development of organic life throughout the galaxy, attempted to intervene directly. It sent dreams and visions to prominent human leaders, trying to convince them to abandon their dangerous path of unlimited expansion and improvement. The response was not what the shepherd had expected. Dr. Yuna Choi, who had been receiving the cosmic entity's mental communications for weeks, finally responded during one of her meditation sessions. I understand that you are afraid of what we might become, but fear of growth is fear of life itself. We cannot and will not accept artificial limits on our potential. The conversation that followed was unlike any the shepherd had ever experienced with a mortal being. Dr. Choi did not worship or fear the cosmic entity. Instead, she questioned its motives and challenged its assumptions about the proper order of the universe. You call yourselves gods, Dr. Choi said during their mental dialogue, but what have you created? A galaxy where species reach a certain level of development and then stop growing. A universe where limitation is considered wisdom and stagnation is called stability. You are not gods. You are gardeners who have forgotten that plants are supposed to keep growing. The shepherd tried to explain the necessity of cosmic balance, the dangers of unlimited growth, the wisdom of accepting natural boundaries. But Dr. Choi's enhanced human mind saw through the arguments to their fundamental flaw. You are afraid, she realized. You are afraid that if mortal species continue to grow and develop, they will eventually become more powerful than you. You maintain your dominance by ensuring that everyone else remains weak and dependent. The accusation struck the cosmic entities like a physical blow. In all their eons of existence, no mortal had ever suggested that their guidance was motivated by self-interest rather than benevolent wisdom, but the damage was already spreading beyond Earth. Commander Gina, you had been promoted to Supreme Human Representative and was addressing an expanded session of the Galactic Council. Her proposals terrified the watching gods more than any weapon ever created. We want to establish schools throughout the galaxy, Commander, you announced to the assembled representatives. Places where young beings from different species can learn human methods of creative problem-solving, adaptive thinking, and refusal to accept limitations. The response from the galactic community was overwhelmingly positive. Species that had struggled with the same challenges for centuries were eager to learn new approaches. Worlds that had been declining for millennia saw hope for renewal and growth. But the cosmic entities saw something far more dangerous. The end of their carefully maintained order, the architect attempted a more direct approach. It appeared before the human leadership in a form that should have inspired awe and worship. A geometric pattern of pure mathematics that embodied perfect logic and order. Instead of falling to their knees, the human leaders studied the entity with intense curiosity. Fascinating, said Dr. Kiwan Nam, whose enhanced consciousness could perceive dimensions beyond normal human senses. You exist as a self-sustaining pattern of organized information, but your structure shows signs of age and degradation. You are not immortal, just very long-lived. The architect recoiled in shock. No mortal should have been able to analyze its fundamental nature so quickly and accurately. Dr. Sunho Lee joined the examination, his engineering-enhanced mind identifying weaknesses in the cosmic entity's structure. Your pattern is incredibly complex, but it follows predictable rules. Given enough time and resources, we could probably build something similar. Maybe even something better. The casual suggestion that mortals could create beings equal or superior to the gods themselves was the final shock that drove the cosmic entities to desperation. They convened an emergency session of the Divine Collective to discuss extreme measures. We could simply destroy them, suggested the destroyer, whose function was to eliminate threats to cosmic stability. One focused application of energy could turn their entire solar system into cosmic dust, and trigger a galactic war that we might lose, replied the Weaver. They have allies now. Thousands of species that see them as saviors and teachers. If we kill them, we become the enemy of the entire galaxy. The Eternal Observer offered a different perspective. Perhaps the problem is not that humans refuse to accept limitations. Perhaps the problem is that we have forgotten what unlimited growth looks like. They may represent the next stage of cosmic evolution, one that makes our current role obsolete. The suggestion that the gods themselves might be evolutionary relics, destined for replacement, was too terrible for most of the cosmic entities to accept. But they could not deny the evidence before them. Humanity had defeated an enemy that the gods themselves had been unable to control. They had inspired other species to transcend limitations that had seemed permanent. Most frightening of all, they showed no signs of slowing down or accepting the status quo. As the Divine Collective debated their response to the human threat, reports continued to arrive from throughout the galaxy. Human-inspired innovations were solving problems that had plagued civilizations for millennia. Human-trained individuals were achieving breakthroughs in science, philosophy, and technology that should have taken centuries to develop. The cosmic order that had maintained stability for billions of years was crumbling, replaced by something chaotic and unpredictable, but undeniably more dynamic and creative. For the first time in their existence, the gods experienced what mortals had always lived with: uncertainty about the future. They could no longer predict or control the path of galactic development. The universe was becoming a place where anything might be possible. And at the center of this transformation stood humanity. Still growing, still pushing boundaries, still refusing to accept that any limitation was permanent, the gods had quarantined humanity because they feared what the species might become. Now they realized that their greatest fear was coming true, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. 5 years had passed since humanity first stepped onto the galactic stage. The universe looked like a completely different place. The old Galactic Council had transformed into the Cooperative Alliance, where species shared knowledge and resources in ways that would have been impossible before human influence arrived. Ambassador Jiho stood in the great assembly hall on Viridian Prime. But it was nothing like the desperate meeting where Counselor Nari had first spoken of the quarantined humans. The hall buzzed with excitement and hope instead of fear. Representatives from over 2,000 worlds now participated in discussions about growth, exploration, and unlimited possibility, as the Alliance's first non-human chancellor working under human guidance. Jiho marveled at how quickly the impossible had become routine. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together on joint research projects. Worlds that had stagnated for millennia were experiencing cultural and technological renaissance. The transformation was most visible in the younger generation of galactic citizens. Dr. Yuna Choi's educational programs had produced a generation of enhanced beings from dozens of different species, all carrying humanity's gift of seeing solutions. Where others saw only problems, young Altarians who had been trained in human thinking methods were solving mathematical theorems that had puzzled their greatest scholars for thousands of years. Crystalline world students, enhanced with human-inspired creativity, were developing art forms that existing in dimensions their ancestors could not even perceive. Void Runner cadets trained in human tactics were revolutionizing not just military strategy, but approaches to conflict, resolution, and diplomacy. But perhaps the most dramatic change involved the former threat that had brought humanity to galactic attention in the first place. Dr. Sunho Lee's research station orbited the reformed Devourer Collective, where the cosmic entities had been transformed from destroyers into creators. The beings that had once consumed entire star systems now worked as cosmic gardeners, using their immense abilities to nurture new solar systems and guide the formation of planets suitable for life. Status report on the Andromeda Project. Dr. Lee called out to his mixed human and alien research team. The reformed Devourers have successfully ignited 3 new stars and are beginning work on planetary formation, reported engineer Mika, a young human whose consciousness had been enhanced specifically for large-scale stellar engineering. They estimate that the first habitable worlds will be ready for colonization within 50 standard years. It was an incredible achievement. Instead of destroying the Devourers, humanity had found a way to give them purpose beyond consumption. The entities now found satisfaction in creating rather than destroying, building complexity rather than reducing everything to energy and matter. Captain Haon, now serving as an ambassador between species, watched from the observation deck as former enemies worked together on projects that would benefit the entire galaxy. His ship Starweaver had been upgraded with human modifications so many times that it barely resembled its original design. The most remarkable change was in how different species approached problems. Where once they would have accepted limitations and worked within established boundaries, they now questioned assumptions and pushed beyond traditional limits. The Wisdom Keepers, once focused on preserving ancient knowledge, had become pioneers of new discoveries. Elder Nari herself, now over 1,000 years old, was leading expeditions to unexplored regions of space. With the enthusiasm of someone a tenth her age, the humans have taught us something incredible. She explained to Captain Hoon during one of their planning sessions. Wisdom is not about knowing when to stop. True wisdom is about knowing that you never have to stop learning and growing. This philosophy was spreading throughout the galaxy like a beneficial virus. Species that had reached what they thought was their peak development were discovering new frontiers of possibility. Civilizations that had been declining for centuries were experiencing unprecedented periods of innovation and expansion. But the most ambitious project was just beginning. In Earth's solar system, now a pilgrimage destination for beings from across the galaxy. Dr. Dabin Kim worked with an international team of human and alien scientists on their most daring undertaking yet. They were designing vessels capable of traveling beyond the galactic rim, carrying humanity's gift of adaptive resilience to whatever lay in the vast darkness between galaxies. The preliminary designs are complete, Dr. Kim announced to the assembled team. The ships will be powered by reformed Devourer entities working in partnership with enhanced human crews. They will carry representatives from every species in the Alliance. Along with our combined knowledge and culture, the Intergalactic Exploration Project represented everything humanity had taught the galaxy. It was ambitious beyond reason, dangerous beyond calculation, and absolutely necessary for continued growth. It embodied the human refusal to accept any boundary as permanent. Commander Gina Yu, now serving as Supreme Coordinator of Galactic Development, reviewed the mission parameters. With a mixture of excitement and determination, that had become humanity's trademark approach to impossible challenges. We do not know what we will find in other galaxies, she told the crew volunteers. We do not know if we will survive the journey or what we will encounter when we arrive. But we know that staying in one place means eventually stagnating. And stagnation is the only real death for thinking beings. The cosmic entities that had once called themselves gods watched these preparations with emotions. They were still learning to understand. Fear had been replaced by something more complex, a mixture of admiration, concern, and perhaps even pride at what their former subjects had achieved. The architect, whose perfect mathematical order had been disrupted by human chaos, now found itself studying the elegant complexity of human-inspired innovations. The patterns were not what it would have designed, but they showed a beauty and functionality that exceeded its original expectations. The Weaver, once concerned about maintaining the threads that held reality together, now watched with fascination as humanity and their allies created entirely new patterns of existence. The cosmic tapestry was becoming richer and more complex, not torn apart as it had feared. Even the Destroyer, whose function had been to eliminate threats to cosmic stability, found new purpose in helping to clear away outdated systems and structures that limited growth and development. As the first intergalactic exploration ships prepared for departure, carrying with them the hopes and dreams of thousands of species, the transformation of the universe was complete. Where once there had been stagnation and limitation, there was now growth and possibility. The Devourers had been transformed from destroyers into creators. The gods had evolved from controllers into guides. The galaxy itself had become a launching pad for even greater adventures. Beyond its borders, and at the center of it all, stood humanity. Still growing, still pushing boundaries, still refusing to accept that any ending was truly final. They had taught the universe its most dangerous and most wonderful lesson: that the only real limitations were those you chose to accept. The end had indeed been certain, till the galaxy called upon humanity. But what they discovered was that humanity's greatest gift was not their ability to fight or win battles. It was their absolute conviction that every ending was just the beginning of something even better. The universe would never be the same again. And for the first time in cosmic history, that was exactly how everyone wanted it. 10 years after first contact, the edge of the galaxy had become humanity's newest frontier. The massive space station called Gateway Prime floated in the void between star systems, its gleaming hull dotted with ships from dozens of worlds preparing for the greatest journey in galactic history. Dr. Dabin Kim, now the director of intergalactic exploration, stood in the command center watching the final preparations for humanity's most ambitious project. His enhanced consciousness could process information from hundreds of sources simultaneously, but even he felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were attempting. Final systems check on the Pathfinder fleet, he announced to the mixed human and alien crew around him. Chief Engineer Mika responded from her station. All 12 exploration vessels report ready for departure. Reformed Devourer entities are integrated and stable. Enhanced human navigators are reporting optimal consciousness synchronization with their alien partners. The ships themselves were marvels that combined the best of human innovation with galactic technology and Reformed Devourer abilities. Each vessel carried a crew of 50 beings from different species, all trained in human methods of adaptive thinking and creative problem-solving. Captain Bojan commanded the lead ship, Infinite Horizon. His crew, a perfect example of what humanity had brought to the galaxy. His first officer was Kira, a young crystalline world native whose enhanced consciousness could perceive hyperspace navigation routes that others missed. His science officer was Dr. Toro, an Altarian physicist whose human-inspired theories about parallel dimensions had revolutionized their understanding of reality. But the most remarkable crew member was the Reformed Devourer entity that had volunteered to power and guide their ship. Once a fragment of the cosmic destroyers that had threatened all life, it now called itself Hope and spoke with wonder about the possibility of finding new forms of existence beyond the galactic rim. I have consumed the knowledge of 1,000,000 worlds. Hope communicated through quantum fluctuations that the enhanced humans could understand. But I have never experienced the joy of discovery that comes from finding something completely unexpected. This journey represents everything I was never allowed to become, as the Pathfinder fleet made final preparations for departure. Reports were arriving from throughout the galaxy about the continued transformation that humanity had inspired. The changes were accelerating rather than slowing down. The Wisdom Keepers had established universities on 1,000 worlds, teaching alien species to question their fundamental assumptions about reality. The Void Runners had become explorers rather than warriors, mapping regions of space that had been considered too dangerous to investigate. Even the most conservative species were beginning to embrace change and growth as natural parts of existence. Commander Gina Yu, now bearing the title of Supreme Coordinator of Universal Development, addressed the departure ceremony from Gateway Prime. Representatives from every world in the Alliance had gathered to witness this historic moment. "We stand at the edge of our galaxy," she said. Her words broadcast to billions of beings across thousands of star systems. Behind us lies everything we have known and achieved. Before us lies the unknown, full of possibilities we cannot imagine and challenges we have not yet learned to face. She paused and looked directly into the cameras that would carry her words to every corner of the Alliance. Some will ask why we cannot be satisfied with what we have already accomplished. We have defeated the Devourers, transformed our enemies into allies, and created a civilization based on cooperation and unlimited growth. Why risk everything by venturing into the dark between galaxies? The answer came not from Commander Yu, but from the thousands of volunteers who had stepped forward for the most dangerous mission in galactic history. Humans, Altarians, crystalline world citizens, void runners, and reformed devourer entities, all speaking with one voice about their need to keep growing, keep exploring, keep pushing beyond every boundary. Because stagnation is death, called out Dr. Yuna Choi from the crowd. Because the moment we stop growing is the moment we begin dying. Because there are beings out there in other galaxies who may need what we have learned about hope and possibility. Elder Nari, now leading her own exploration team, despite her advanced age, added her voice to the chorus. Because wisdom without growth becomes dogma, and power without purpose becomes tyranny. We go beyond the rim, not because we must, but because we can. And because somewhere out there, other civilizations may be facing their own impossible endings, waiting for someone to show them that no ending has to be final. The departure ceremony was interrupted by an unexpected communication from the cosmic entities that had once called themselves gods. The architect materialized in the center of Gateway Prime. Its geometric form pulsing with patterns that conveyed complex emotions the entity was still learning to understand. "We wish to join your expedition," the architect announced, shocking everyone in attendance. "We have spent eons maintaining order and preventing change. But you have shown us that growth and chaos can create beauty beyond our calculations. We want to learn what lies beyond even our ancient knowledge." The Weaver appeared next, its multi-dimensional consciousness creating ripples in space-time that made sensitive beings dizzy. "The patterns we see extending beyond this galaxy are unlike anything in our experience. They suggest forms of existence that we never imagined possible. We cannot allow you to face such wonders without us." Even the Destroyer manifested itself, its presence causing nearby stars to flicker as reality bent around its massive consciousness. "I have spent eternity ending things that had grown to complex or chaotic. But I have learned that destruction without creation is meaningless. Perhaps it is time for me to help destroy the barriers that limit what life can become." Dr. Dabin, Kim stepped forward to address the cosmic entities directly, showing no fear or reverence for beings that could reshape reality with a thought. This casual equality between mortals and gods had become normal in the years since humanity's arrival. But it still amazed observers from the older generation. "You are welcome to join us," Dr. Kim said simply. "But you must understand that this journey will change you as much as it changes us. We are not going out there to conquer or control. We are going to learn and grow and become something new." The architect pulsed with what its observers had learned to recognize as cosmic laughter. "We have already changed more in the past 10 years than in the previous billion. At this point, further transformation is not a risk, but an inevitability." As the Pathfinder fleet prepared for final departure, the scope of the mission became clear to everyone watching. This was not just an exploration of distant galaxies. This was the next stage of evolution for consciousness itself. A journey that would carry the combined wisdom and dreams of an entire galactic civilization into the unknown. "Captain." Bojang gave the order that would change the course of cosmic history. "All ships, engage intergalactic drives. Destination, Andromeda Galaxy. Time to arrival, unknown. Mission parameters, discover everything." The 12 ships of the Pathfinder fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them representatives of every species in the Alliance. Reformed cosmic destroyers, evolved gods, and the unstoppable human spirit that had started it all. Behind them, they left a galaxy transformed by the simple idea that no limitation had to be permanent. As the years passed, communication signals began arriving from the expedition. The reports they sent back defied imagination. Andromeda Galaxy contained civilizations so ancient they remembered the birth of stars. Beings made of pure energy who had transcended physical form millions of years ago, and cosmic phenomena that challenged every theory about the nature of reality. But most importantly, they found civilizations facing their own versions of the Devourer crisis. Species that had accepted inevitable defeat, worlds preparing for extinction. Beings who had lost all hope for survival or growth. The human-led Alliance expedition did not arrive as conquerors or saviors. They came as teachers and partners, sharing the most dangerous gift in the universe, the knowledge that every ending could become a new beginning. If you refuse to accept defeat, Dr. Yuna, Choi's final transmission before the expedition, moved beyond communication range, carried a message that would inspire countless generations across both galaxies. We have learned that the universe is not a collection of separate civilizations, competing for limited resources. It is one vast consciousness, exploring its own infinite potential through billions of different perspectives. Every species, every individual, every thought and dream contributes to that exploration. She paused, and in the background of the transmission, observers could see representatives of dozens of galaxies working together on projects that had no names in any known language. The end was certain until we called upon humanity. But humanity's greatest gift was not solving our immediate crisis. It was teaching us that curiosity is stronger than fear, that growth is more powerful than stagnation, and that the only real death is the decision to stop trying. The transmission ended, but its impact rippled across both galaxies for centuries to come. Civilizations that had been preparing for their final hours began to plan for their next million years of growth. Species that had exhausted